work. I didn't think that went through.
I actually thought of a question. Are myself and my team both being spotlighted, and then we're just keeping one off when we're not on? Or
Yep. So I'll just spotlight you both and then you can turn your camera off if you're not the one. Yep.
okay, perfect. Thank you.
And Kimberly, it's 12:30 and we have quite a few of them signed on. So if you are ready to go, I think you can start.
Perfect. Thank you so much. I was just seeing how crazy it is to only see my screen, but welcome everyone. I am just pulling everything up for myself here. All right. So hello, good afternoon. My name is Kimberly Scanlon. I use she, her pronouns. Today I am wearing a black shirt. I have reddish brown hair in curls. I have greenish eyes. And I am joined by my colleague, Ashley Craig Lowe, with the Arrowhead Area Agency on Aging as well. And we would like to welcome all of you to today's session titled Thriving Together, Unlocking the Potential of Home Care Cooperatives. Before we start, I do have some housekeeping here, housekeeping items. We have arranged for American Sign Language interpreters who will be present throughout the session. These interpreters will rotate every 20 minutes, ensuring that everyone can follow the content effectively. Today's session will be recorded to share on our Arrowhead Area Agency on Aging YouTube channel. I encourage you to subscribe to our channel so you can keep up with the latest additions to our video library. We are always looking for suggestions for future webinar topics as well. If you do have suggestions for topics or speakers, feel free to send those to me at my email address anytime, which I will share. Please keep your microphone set to mute. Just a note, if you experience any issues with your bandwidth or audio quality, it often helps to disable your camera. If you'd like, you can enter your first name and organization or community that you're from in the chat box, what you are hoping to get out of today's session, and how you found out about it. And Ashley, as I mentioned earlier, is managing the chat box for me. So thank you, Ashley. If you have any questions during today's session, please feel free to enter your question into the chat and we will address them at the end or throughout the presentation as we see fit. We will also take some additional questions at that time. And at the close of today's session, you'll see a quick evaluation of today's session pop up in your browser. So please take a moment and complete that survey if you don't mind. It helps us greatly with planning future sessions. One last quick reminder, visit our Facebook page for more information about other upcoming sessions. And you can also check our website at arrowheadaging.org. A little bit about the Arrowhead Area Agency on Aging before we get into some of the context here. The Arrowhead Regional Development Commission and Arrowhead Area Agency on Aging are designated by the Minnesota Board on Aging as the Area Agency on Aging for the Planning and Service Area under the authority of Title III of the Older Americans Act. Minnesota has 7 AAAs across the state that are the local connections to older Minnesotans and the community support they need as they age. The Arrowhead Area Agency on Aging's planning and service area, as designated by the Minnesota Board on Aging, includes the counties Aiken, Carlton, Cook, Itasca, Couchiching, Lake, and St. Louis. The Arrowhead Area Agency on Aging is committed to helping older adults maintain their highest level of independence. Area agencies on aging are regional organizations that provide the services, supports, and information for just about everything that older adults and their families could need. I am honored to read our land acknowledgement next. This is Arrowhead Area Agency on Aging Land Acknowledgement. As we support our mission to help older adults maintain their highest level of independence, we do this while being respectful of the space we are being welcomed into by Indigenous people. We strive to deepen our understanding of the multiple ways in which people see and understand land and acknowledge the Indigenous people who have relationships with this land. We also acknowledge the decades of historical trauma, loss, and grief experienced by Indigenous people. It is our promise to not only recognize these truths, but also take action to show support of our Indigenous elders, neighbors, and friends, and understand our place within the past, present, and future of this land. We know this is just one step in recognizing and honoring the sovereignty of tribal nations. Okay, so kind of opening up to the topic at hand now, you might be wondering why this particular conversation, why this topic today? And I want to just introduce myself a little bit more by what I do. I work under an initiative called Elder Care Development Partnership, or EDP. And we help grow and sustain aging services through a number of ways. One way is through community development around gap areas. And the gap areas that we focus on are housing, transportation, crisis stabilization, chore services, and workforce. We also provide technical assistance to aging service providers and other community partners. And part of this is done really by introducing new or innovative ideas, or maybe a new way or approach to an existing challenge. And so this topic came up when we were thinking about workforce, actually, and a different way to look at workforce issues. What we thought of going through learning more about cooperatives is that it also kind of goes into these other gap areas as well, whether it's crisis stabilization or something else. We saw this as a really good topic to introduce to folks who may not be super familiar with them at this time. So with that being said, I would love to introduce you to our first speaker. This is Electra, and I'm going to let her introduce herself and go into her presentation. So thank you so much for being here, Electra. I'm going to pass it over to you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Kimberly, and thank you, Ashley, and all of our friends at the Arrowhead Agency of Aging. We're so glad to be here. My name is Electra Skrzydlewski. I'm the Director of Shared Ownership at the Metropolitan Consortium of Community Developers. We are based in Minneapolis, Minnesota, but our shared ownership work serves the entire state of Minnesota. I'm joining the conversation today with curly hair, black glasses, a floral shirt, and I use she, her pronouns. Later on in the conversation, I'm going to introduce you all to a good friend of mine, Susan Rosette, who's the Executive Director for Cardinal Homecare Cooperative based in Two Harbors, Minnesota. All right, let's go ahead. So MCCD, as our short name, our acronym, makes it a little bit easier to tell you who we are. But we are a consortium of nonprofit affordable housing developers and economic development organizations and a community development financial institution that comes together around opportunities to expand the wealth and resources that are flowing through our neighborhoods to help support innovative housing and economic development initiatives. So collectively, we work to advance racial and economic justice by leveraging and stewarding community development resources. And our work is really rooted in our values by helping folks across Minnesota achieve their goals, self-determined goals. And we work across 4 areas. That's small business development, across the spectrum from micro enterprise to shared ownership businesses. We provide capital through our lending capacity as a CDFI. We engage with state and local lawmakers on policy and advocacy work, and we help build the field through leadership development efforts to bring more early and mid-stage developers into this work and thinking. Let's go ahead. So I'm sure it comes as no surprise to anyone who's joining the call today that Minnesota, like so many other communities across the country and across the world, have a rapidly aging population. And with that rapidly aging population, there typically becomes the onset of one or more disabilities or additional support needs that people have. So there's a growing need for direct care services and caregivers who have the skills and talents to meet our community members' needs. And, the unfortunate reality is that these are very challenging jobs, incredibly rewarding, but challenging nonetheless. And there are some kind of industry issues that prevent folks from staying in the field as long as they'd like to. So the current supply of folks that are able to provide care in Minnesota is not currently meeting the demand. So our state has a need for about 130,000 more providers in order to meet our demand estimates by 2030. So it's critical that Minnesota takes a hard look at some solutions for addressing our workforce care shortage, because that will certainly exacerbate the care crisis if we don't step up and address it. So the Minnesota Department of Human Services has been engaged in a number of different initiatives for the last 5 years and conducted a statewide survey that asked caregivers, folks that support people being served through Minnesota programs, and also the people that were being served themselves to really understand kind of what the landscape looks like and where there are opportunities to do things different. And they found that among the issues that kind of motivate caregivers to exit the sector is really around pay. But there are other things that are just as important for some folks, like the unpredictability of scheduling, a lack of respect for the profession, lack of kind of career mobility opportunities or training opportunities, that some folks just, they want the conditions, both the social and economic conditions around their work to change. And sadly, that has been happening too slowly. Let's go ahead. However, there is an enormous and wonderful opportunity ahead of us, and one that has kind of been tested and proven over the last 12 years. So worker-owned cooperative enterprises may be businesses that you're familiar with, and they actually may be businesses that you've not really heard a whole lot about. So our conversation today is going to kind of talk to you a little bit more about what does it mean for a business to be a worker-owned cooperative. And fortunately, we have one of the most incredible cooperators in our community on the call today to tell you a little bit about her experience and her business. So these businesses have been found to not only provide better pay for folks in the field, but also to really leverage their resources to invest more in the business overall. And that translates to a number of different benefits for the folks that are working in communities in these roles. So not only are they able to learn more, get on training pathways that are different, but they are able to benefit from having a voice and recognition in their workplace as, folks who have the expertise to inform the way the business should go forward. And by virtue of really shifting the nature of work and the culture around work, turnover is much lower than it is for privately held businesses, where one statistic, you'll see it on your screen there, is that turnover can be incredibly high in this field, upward of more than 80%. When we're tracking kind of what changes for some of these worker-owned cooperatives across the country, we see that turnover is dramatically reduced by more than half. You'll hear Susie tell you a little bit more about why that's the case. Let's go ahead. So why employee ownership? Well, there's a number of different models, and there are a number of different opportunities that we have in Minnesota that we'd like to talk to you about today. So as the community's population ages, what we're seeing is also that there are a number of small businesses that are owned by baby boomers across Minnesota and elsewhere in the country. And as these baby boomer business owners are thinking about the next stage of their life and kind of where they might want to transition, they don't always have a strong plan for what that might look like. And they might also not be able to see kind of a clear pathway to retirement. So if we fail to examine the opportunity around that transition, our community will surely see business closures. And one of the reasons for that is that the private marketplace, or where business owners can sell their enterprise, is a lot more constrained than I think a lot of folks realize that it is. And in Minnesota, that tends to be true as well. We also have an opportunity to address the business ownership and racial wealth gap in Minnesota, where this is a wonderful place for small business development and for folks to really achieve their dreams. But what we do see is that there are far fewer businesses that are owned by people of color. And by virtue of business ownership being one pathway to build wealth, there's also a rather significant racial wealth gap that we'd like to see closed so that all of our community members can thrive and have equal opportunities for prosperity. Now, employee ownership is not new. It may be something that you're not very familiar with, and that's okay. Hopefully when you leave this conversation today, you'll know more than you came knowing. But it is an underutilized, incredibly effective tool for both job creation and retention, but also wealth creation and retention. So we'll talk to you a little bit more about that in just a moment. Let's go ahead. So there is more than one way to be employee owned. Let's go ahead and hit enter on this slide. I think there might be some animations. Awesome, thank you. So whether a business has thousands of employees or just a few, there is an ownership structure that will work. So some of these ownership structures have a distinct set of features and a distinct set of benefits that come with them, but employee-owned cooperatives are among the most accessible forms of employee ownership, and also among the types of employee ownership that give workers in the field the most direct ownership and control and decision-making over the way business happens. Let's go ahead. All right. So like I mentioned, there are a few different types of employee ownership. There are employee ownership stock plans. You might be familiar with some of these types of businesses. There are numerous ESOP or employee stock ownership plan businesses in Minnesota. These are typically the best fit for agencies that are very large. Typically far more than 50 employees, upward of 100, 200, 300 employees are most suitable for this. And part of that reason is that there are a lot of compliance requirements for managing an employee stock ownership plan, as well as the overall transition costs tend to be a little bit higher, which is easier and more manageable for larger companies. Employee ownership trusts are also one of the newer types of employee ownership and have far fewer requirements, are more accessible. But the cool thing is they can also be paired with employee-owned cooperative models. We'll go ahead. All right, there's some animations on this one too. So when you're thinking about what is a cooperative, what is it that makes it different? There are a number of kind of key things that achieve that. So imagine this, a business model that is really about being rooted in local communities, is part of a value-based global movement to kind of change those social and economic conditions and really take a different look at what it means to be a part of the workforce. A model that delivers tangible benefits to the workforce and community, is flexible and innovative, is not a one-size-fits-all solution, but is a solution that can be applied to many different contexts, and is successful and resilient and has a long history of being that way, and also exists in nearly every industry and sector of the economy. Well, if you would like to learn more about that, you are in the right place, because that's what worker cooperation is all about. Let's go ahead. So let's take a look at some of the key features of this business model. And this is helpful to kind of give you a snapshot about what's really different here. So these are businesses that are owned by the employees that work there. They're also controlled by the employees that work there. And, you know, sometimes I don't love to use the word controlled, but I do think that in this context, it's important to really elevate what that means. So many of us have had experiences where we are in a working environment and we don't have any say over what happens there. We can voice our concerns, we can ask our questions, but that doesn't always mean that we're going to be heard. Certainly doesn't mean that we're going to be listened to. Also doesn't always mean that what we need or what we want will translate into action in that business. So when we're talking about who is controlling the enterprise and who is making decisions and who is ultimately responsible for that business, it's the folks that work there. So that is one of the kind of key distinctions of the business model. Now, in order to be an employee owner, employees are asked to make an equity investment in that business to demonstrate that they are signaling that they have a readiness and interest and a long-term investment in that business's future. So cooperatives can determine for themselves what is the right level of equity investment. In this business model, it isn't the same as kind of corporate stock companies where the number of shares that you own determine the level of influence that you have over that business. Instead, these businesses operate on a one member, one share, one vote basis. So everybody is coming to the table making the same equity investment in order to gain the rights and responsibilities of membership. Certainly, employee owners can invest more into the business to help it grow or to help it meet its needs over time, but that is not a requirement of the business model. So as I mentioned, one member, one share, one vote, that translates into the ability to make those decisions for that business on a democratic basis. So these are businesses that are jointly owned and democratically controlled by the folks that work there. And they have a kind of a common structure where the general body, so like all of the workers will come together to elect the board of directors. And then that smaller group of folks might make some of those major vision, strategy, kind of overall directional decisions in consultation with the members to kind of really bring their voice to life, but also so that not everybody has to participate in that level of decision making all the time. And to kind of similar to like a nonprofit structure, there are still staff, there are still management staff, there are still staff that have other roles that will partner with that board so that they have a kind of a global picture of what's going on with that business. So by virtue of having an equity investment and board governance, those are the things that help kind of set the stage for sharing the risk for the business and also benefiting from that business's success and reaping the rewards. So I'm sure, again, so many of you probably know small business owners and have heard stories about the decisions that they have to make, kind of some of the weight that they're carrying as the kind of sole person that's holding responsibility for the well-being and perpetuation of that business. Well, here in a cooperative model, that risk, that responsibility, those obligations are shared across the employee owners that have made their investment into the business with both their monetary contribution, but also their labor contribution. So their ability to really be inside and functioning within the business gives them quite a lot of perspective that is useful for making decisions. And then again, they have a participatory management structure where, you know, by virtue of becoming a member of the cooperative, it means that you're able to kind of just help decide and help shape the direction of that enterprise by voicing your concerns through the channels that cooperative creates for that. Let's go ahead to the next one. So like I said, I wanted to give you a picture about how decision-making can work. There are many scenarios where that cooperative or many cooperatives might choose a different decision-making model, one that may be kind of smaller or has kind of more check-in points. It can be as simple or as complex as that business chooses, but this is kind of a general structure to help paint a picture for you. So like I said, you'll have your general co-op membership, which are all the employees in the enterprise. And to kind of pause there, in an employee-owned cooperative, the people that work there don't all have to be members. You can have people that are involved with the business who are comfortable and perfectly satisfied with being an employee who comes to work, performs their labor, and then goes on and goes home and does what they like. But in a worker-owned cooperative, you really will have a pathway to ownership, meaning that there is a kind of by design, you know, well-defined, clear to all structure for how somebody becomes a membership and what's required of them in order for them to fulfill the requirements of eligibility. So once you have folks that have elected or like bought into membership or have agreed to meet the conditions of membership, those folks come together, elect the board on that one person, one vote basis. And then that smaller group of folks elects then supervises the general manager or CEO, or in many cases with these types of businesses, the executive director or head administrator. And then that person might hire management who supervises staff and helps oversee the day-to-day operations. And typically those people may be the same. They might have a structured management system. You can go ahead to the next one. So there are some kind of common things as a co-op developer that I hear when I'm talking to folks who might be interested in considering their options. And there are a few kind of common myths about employee ownership. And one of them is often that my employees can't afford to buy the business. When we're talking about what that level of buy-in is and how it's not prescriptive, but rather there can be an ongoing dialogue between potentially that selling owner and the new owner about the new owners about what the right price is and what the share price is. And typically the share buy-in is just one part of the resources needed in order to transition or operate a cooperatively owned business. But a lot of co-ops, particularly in the home and direct care field, actually don't take all of that buy-in at once. Some of them come up with different payment plan arrangements or strategies. That might be something like a payroll deduction, or somebody can make contributions toward their membership share as they're going through the pathway for membership. So again, the model has quite a lot of flexibility, and folks can decide for themselves what exactly is most suitable for their context. I also hear sometimes that, my employees can't run my business. They're not cut out to be business owners. And, that's one of my favorite myths to really challenge. I have met some of the most brilliant, incredible, strategic, creative folks as I've been doing development and support work for worker-owned cooperatives in this industry. And I will tell you that the folks that are living and breathing this work every day and building businesses on behalf of someone else know very, very well what these businesses need and how they can best deliver care and have a strong presence in community. So anecdotally and even research-wise, that myth doesn't check out. And then selling to workers could be expensive or is complicated. And that also doesn't have to be the case. There are not a ton of organizations that provide this kind of support, but Minnesota is very fortunate where there are a few, and we're pretty good at it. So, there's a lot of support to have those kind of conversations and really get people to understand what this process is like, what it requires, and kind of the amount of time that it takes in order to do it well, so that both the selling owner, who may or may not stay on with the business after it transitions to employee ownership, or if they're exiting, what that exit plan and succession plan really looks like. But we can go into more there. That's an entirely separate conversation. We'll touch on just a few key aspects of it today. You can go ahead. So how does employee ownership improve job quality? Kimberly and I touched on this just a bit in the beginning. There are a couple of animations on this one. Thank you. So we've already talked about ownership and shared decision-making. Certainly, people feel better when they know that their voice matters. Job security. If you are an owner of the enterprise, you're not fearing day to day if you're going to make a mistake and it's going to result in you losing your job. Democratically controlled businesses also take a hard look at fair compensation and really think thoughtfully about what it's going to take in order to deliver the benefits and the compensation packages that are competitive, are fair, can grow and change with the employees, and really what's needed to kind of close the gap and maybe benefits that they didn't have the ability to access before. Because information, education, and training is one of the cooperative principles that almost all cooperatives, regardless of type, regardless of where they're located in the world, really prioritize and invest in. A person who may have been a caregiver for 10 years, who has an interest in learning more and doing more, can find opportunities for that in their cooperative business. Partially because as a business owner, they're learning skills about what a business owner needs to know in order to effectively support that business. And again, the flexibility of this business model allows for a lot of innovation. One of the things that is kind of common in this field is that the majority of the co-ops that are currently operating have been focusing on home care alone. And that's fantastic. That's wonderful. There's certainly a need for that. But the co-ops that you will soon come to know across Minnesota have taken a different approach where they're bringing in other services to have a more robust service offering for the ways in which they can deliver support to Minnesotans. They're also thinking about work-life balance and understanding that unpredictable scheduling, demanding hours, being stretched too thin really minimizes a person's opportunity to step away from work and enjoy the fruits of their labor. You also see increased job satisfaction and motivation. Motivation largely because this is their business. So if they have kind of a stake in what happens to that business and how customers are treated, how the staff is treated, they are really, in it to pay attention to what's going on in the business. You also see increased job satisfaction, again, because of that decision-making, that ability to appreciate and recognize and address things that the employees themselves think is important and valuable. And then you tend to see that focus on community impact, social and environmental responsibility, because one of the other cooperative principles, there are 7, is about concern for community. So when you have all of these different things that are improving job quality, the amazing benefit that transfers to community is you have improved quality of care. So when you're not experiencing turnover with the direct care agency that you're working with, you have a reliable partner. You have people that, come to their work joyfully and, are appreciated and recognize how valuable their work is, which again, then translates into better care for the people they're in community with. So I don't think we're actually gonna talk about this one, and then I'm gonna pause and introduce you to my very good friend. So about 2 years ago, MCCD was contacted by the Minnesota Department of Human Services when they used some of their American Rescue Plan Act COVID relief money to create a number of different grant programs to help really address the workforce shortage crisis. And they knew that MCCD cares about people that are working in, low wage industries and the industries that tend to, have higher turnover, not because they're just hard work industries, but really because, folks need to know what their options are. So MCCD was chosen to administer these workforce development grants specifically for folks who were interested in starting up or converting businesses to employee ownership. This opportunity has sunsetted now, but there are a number of businesses in the state of Minnesota that were able to benefit from receiving those grant funds. And those groups of individuals came together with an idea to build an employee-owned business, and MCCD is just grateful to be one part of their support team. And in the ways that we were able to help support them, a lot of that is around what does it take to be a employee-owned business. So we work with these businesses to provide free, confidential business counseling and assistance that includes everything from governance education and training to business and strategic planning. We're talking about budgeting, financial planning, analysis, really understanding what your money that is coming in and going out of that business is all about, and protecting the business from risks, providing referrals and support for taxation, licensing, accounting, a number of different things. And I'll be honest with you, the licensing process is a doozy in and of itself. So it's always a good idea to have a supportive partner that can help, look into questions, be a supportive partner, find out information. And that's not always easy to do, as I have come to learn, and certainly my friend Susie has come to learn. But we're here to tell you today that it is worth it. It is worth it. So we can also help with marketing and communications planning and getting folks ready for securing additional capital, whether that's a line of credit or loan readiness. So I think we'll take a pause there, and I'm really happy to introduce you to the Executive Director of Cardinal Comfort Care, Susie Rosette. And Susie has had experience as both an entrepreneur running a family business in this field, and then somebody who chose to move toward the employee ownership route. So Susie, I'd love for you to tell the folks on the call a little bit about your story.
Thank you, Electra. Thank you so much. That was a really thorough presentation on cooperatives as a whole, and I really appreciate it. I want to thank Kimberly and Ashley and the interpreters for their hard work today in putting this on. My name is Susie Rosette. My pronouns are she and hers, and I have short blonde hair, and I wear glasses most of the time, and I have blue eyes, and I'm wearing a small flowered blue shirt, and I represent Cardinal Comfort Care Cooperative, and I am, like Electra said, the executive director. So I just wanted to thank you for having me on the panel today, and I'd like to be a resource for anybody that's on the call today to reach out to and talk to about starting a cooperative from the ground up. And with MCCD's help, we've been able to do that. Today, we have 37 employees and 62 clients that we're currently serving. And we really are very grateful for that, and have achieved that through the support of lots of different people. And that's what's so beautiful about the cooperative model, is that you're always entertaining other people's ideas and collaborating, bringing people together, creating a community that can support your business. And I had started out as a sole proprietor of sorts, LLC. My husband and I did hospice for about 14 years. And through that process, we found that there was a big gap in how well people were dying and how poorly they were dying. And it really had to come with what kind of finances you have, right? So, and that's with any home care, not just hospice, just anybody coming into your home and providing care, in a private manner through private pay without insurance is a whole different ballgame. And so we wanted to serve people that were not being served. So we applied for a 245B license, and that took about 2.5 years. It was not expected to take that long, but that's how long it took. And we just received our license in November of last year, 2023, and are up and running and going for it right now. Probably the most exciting part for me personally has been to learn and grow with other cooperators. I've had my hands on over 5,000 people in my life, so I've done a lot of direct care work. And I'm sitting in a different role now as the executive director. So I have had quite a learning curve over the past few years and the ways of DHS and compliance and regulatory information. So you can imagine that that's been quite the overload. But all in all, it's been great. We've been able to, service people in their homes. They're happy with their service, and we're moving forth. And I'm not sure, Electra, if you were going to ask me questions or if you just wanted me to just keep on talking, telling my story. It's up to you ladies.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that might be really great is to show you all a little bit about what makes Cardinal Comfort Care so special. Yeah, I don't know that the audio played, but I think that very short clip gives you a snapshot of how Cardinal kind of views their approach to delivering care. I mean, imagine for a moment if you were, in your most vulnerable state and you weren't feeling your best, and, things around you were not exactly the way you wanted them to be. And the idea of having somebody come into your home was probably stressful for you. Imagine how tough it would be to acclimate to a situation like that if that person kept changing. And you didn't really understand why, but you knew that it created anxiety and tension in you, and that you weren't able to kind of settle into the new conditions or the circumstances that you were existing in. Well, Cardinal Comfort Care says we can do better. And Cardinal Comfort Care will send owners directly to you to provide the support and care that you need. And I'm sure if you've ever been in a restaurant and you knew that that chef made your dinner and came out to your table, that was like a pretty special touch. Well, in the direct care industry, you have that special touch with almost everyone you interact with, because the people that are coming to work with you are the people that are making decisions for how that care will be delivered. And, I will turn it over to Kimberly, who can ask a little bit more about what Susie's experience has been like and why it stood out to her and the agency as something that more folks should know more about.
Sorry, everyone. It took me a second to find my own unmute button, but thank you. And Electra, just let me know if you want to go back to the additional slides that we did pass over. And it seemed like the slides were advancing on their own. I wasn't touching anything, so we may have a timer. Just let me know if I need to go backward or forward with anything. But yes, Susie, I'd love to put out a few questions for you just with your own experience. And then Ashley, if you see any questions in the chat, I welcome everyone to ask questions. I think this would be a good time to go ahead and put them in the chat. So feel free to do that. But I just wanted to talk a little bit or have you share a little bit about maybe that moment, because you did mention some challenges with time and becoming a director, and talk about the moment for you where you maybe had that, oh, I'm going to sit back and notice how lovely this is. If you remember, or if you have some here and there throughout time, maybe share a little bit about that.
Well, thanks, Kimberly. Probably one of the biggest impacts for me was when myself and another person that was in our cohort for the state of Minnesota for Homecare Cooperatives were able to attend a home healthcare cooperative conference out in Washington, D.C. And that was a result of the work that Electra does. And so we were offered this opportunity to go out there and learn in a conference venue about home care cooperatives. And that was pretty early on in the process. And I remember walking in and there was just all this buzz, and it just felt like, these are my people. You felt connected to them right away. They're all caregivers. They're all just super neat people. And to have this philosophy of it's us, not just me, really struck home with me. And I felt that that was probably a very pinnacle moment for me to say, you know what, I'm going through with this. This is something that I really believe in. And from that moment on, started trugging. So, but with that as a base for me to pull from and to meet all the people around the country that were doing this and were doing it well and how they were doing it, it really made a difference in how I felt about moving forward. And moving forward was challenging. The DH system isn't the easiest to work with. I know that if any of you are working with any big governmental agencies, it's not very easy. It's very clunky. And that part became, quite a juggernaut in my hip there for a while. But moving forward, we decided, okay, you know what? We're going to start serving people private pay, just like, what happened is I had my own business and I converted it into a cooperative. So once we converted into the cooperative, we decided with the board of directors that we would provide the private care until we got our license. So we started that process, got our license, and now we're on our way. But I will say this, that when you're out doing the work that we do, you're by yourself a lot and you're out there in the field and you can feel kind of alone. I know that when I've worked for agencies in the past, they knew that I would show up for work and do my job, but really rarely did I have like training opportunities or opportunities to develop myself or my career. And that's the huge difference with this cooperative, is that we're always looking at training. We're always looking at ways that we can create a pathway to, like Electra said, to a more invested ownership into, the company. At Cardinal Comfort Care, we have people join as an employee, and after 6 months, they're offered an opportunity to join the cooperative with performance review, and it costs them $150 to join our cooperative. But at the end of the day, with that $150, gives you your voice, your vote, and your profit sharing and other benefits that we provide. So we're always looking to improve the caregiver side, and there's a fine line between putting client first and the caregiver first. And with the cooperative model, we've made it our motto to put the caregiver first, because if that happens, that that person is going to receive excellent care. So you can imagine how that trickles down to where I'm an owner and I walk in that home. I may be alone, but I'm not alone. I have all of the other cooperators in my group ready at a heartbeat's notice to help me out, or I have an administrator that I can call and ask questions to. If there's a scheduling issue, there's other people that will step in for me. It really is a complete teamwork environment. And I think that makes a huge difference in this field. And we've been able to do that, retain employment for people, and they're excited to work. They want to work more. And it's very rare. It's very rare to actually have people that want to come to a home care business and be involved with it for just that reason, that at some point they can become an owner. And as people are leaving in droves or don't stay with the same companies on and on, you develop these relationships that really make a difference in your workplace, and you feel better about your work. You're doing good work. You're doing hard work, but it's good work. And you have a pride in that. You have a joy in that. And I think that work-life balance can happen in this particular model also. So we have quite a few young mothers with young kids, and there could be some job sharing going on, however it needs to work, we try to accommodate.
I love that. It kind of reminds me of things that I've heard out in the communities, is that it can be hard to kind of compete with other similar or like-minded services. But you mentioned the conference, and I remember a story because we've done some work with each other for our caregiver conference just a while back. And you met some people at the conference that led to collaborations and partnerships. And so that's the flip end, the other end of, that competitive world is that collaborative world. So do you want to expand a little bit on that story where you met Diane and how you work together?
Oh, sure. Absolutely. So I met Diane at that first conference. So we've kind of worked together and talked together and have Zoomed and called and gone to visit each other's cooperatives over the past 2 years. And just recently, she has been in the cohort, and she came to a place where, they had to get moving on their license, and they hadn't received it yet. And she had all these clients all signed up or all lined up to join, but it wasn't happening from a state level at a rate that would work for their cooperative. So we met with our board and we decided, let's help these folks out. We can bring them under our wing our wing, like that, and kind of shelter them until they're ready to launch. And that agreement came forth pretty quickly. We got things together within, I'm going to say, about 3 weeks. And we took them on. And so right now we are in St. Cloud, the Twin Cities, and the North Shore, as far as, you know, our clients and workers. And we will help them along until she feels confident enough that they can launch on their own. And what other business can you do that with? If you're franchised, maybe, but really that spirit of collaboration is what feeds us in this model. And we're proud to do it. We're happy to do it. And we're going to be super happy for them when they are finally strong enough to go out on their own. And we've been able to help each other in lots of different ways. So that story, I think, is very encouraging for, you know, just understanding how collaborative a cooperative can be. You know, it's not just us, it's not just our cooperative, it's every cooperative over the state of Minnesota, through our country and globally. And there have been people that have attended the conference that have been from Germany and Australia that I got to meet too. So it's a model that's been around for a long time. And I'm learning more and more every day about cooperatives and how they operate and how we can operate best. So it just goes with that spirit of being a caregiver and wanting to help others. And we're able to help other caregivers. That's what it's about. It's great.
Wonderful. I am wondering if, Ashley, you have any questions in the chat.
Yes. So do you feel you have an advantage for employee recruitment and retention compared to other home care companies because you're employee owned?
Yes, absolutely. And more than just employee owned, we have opportunity to develop and create our own training opportunities, and help people that are, for instance, maybe they're a caregiver right now, and maybe they would like to be a trainer someday or teach people about a specific skill. And we can invite them, or they're invited in to collaborate with us on that and provide that for other caregivers. So, you know, I think there's a lot of people in the homes every day that think of really neat things that they could probably share with somebody else that they've learned over time, and experience. And here they get to do that. They get to do that in a very effective way. And they can go as far as they want with it. You know, maybe they want to start their own cooperative someday. We'd be very happy to help them do that. So it's all in the spirit of, you know, sharing. And I know it sounds kind of kumbaya-ish, which it can be, I guess, in some respects. But ultimately, it's about creating jobs. And in this little town of Two Harbors, we've been able to create 23 jobs just in Two Harbors. There's not very many employers that have been able to do that in this little town. But when you do good work, when employees that are typically not respected or not treated very well in their jobs, or burnt out, or working for 30 people at a time, one person to 30 other people in a facility, this kind of model looks really good to those folks. And you know, maybe at some point we'll have something to offer to the facilities and say, you know, we got happy, excellent workers. Would you like to see what that's like? And yeah, I mean, sky's the limit.
That was a great answer. One more I have is, do you have to be a full-time employee to be an owner? I know many caregivers just work part-time, so I was curious how you navigate that.
No, you do not have to be. Most of our employees aren't full-time. So I would say, no, you can be a part-time worker. So when it comes down to like the benefits and one of them being profit sharing, so your profit sharing would be based on the hours that you work during that year, you know, but there's no requirement. A lot of caregivers are part-time. We love the part-timers. And one reason why I love part-timers is because they more than likely either have another job or they are taking care of themselves. You know, this is hard work. We need to take care of ourselves and have, you know, 40 hours a week plus kids and a family and all of that that's a tough thing to do. But we also have a higher rate of pay than most of the other agencies in this area. So I think that's attractive too. We're able to do that because of the model. So all the money isn't going to the top. We're trying to disperse that wealth through our community and cooperative.
Well, I have a question, and maybe Electra can chime in too, but what do you think is the reason or maybe your speculation on why people don't want to join into this? What do you think is the like biggest obstacle that they're seeing?
All I can share is what I've heard and what I've seen is I think sometimes it can be intimidating. They don't want to be an owner. It scares the dickens out of them. You know, they don't know what that means. And so it's up to us to really educate people on how a cooperative model works. You don't have to be an owner. You can just be an employee with us. That's fine. But we always want to offer the opportunity to people that are eligible. So, but I would say probably the biggest thing is fear. You know, false evidence appears real. So sometimes this model can give people an opportunity to do something that they never dreamed in their life would happen, and that they would be part of owning a business. So that's where I think I'm always encouraging people that they can do this. And, you know, there's some skin in the game, and it usually is in the form of showing up to board meetings, participating in a committee to help hiring or transportation, or, you know, there is some skin in the game in it, sure. You're not going to get paid for every little thing, but it's exciting too, because you're investing in yourself. You're investing in the cooperative, but you're investing in yourself. So it's not that hard of a stretch for people to invest in themselves when they know it's going to come back to them.
Yeah, I agree with so much of what Susie said. And what I will add is that, you know, there are existing business owners that sometimes hear about this or learn about this and, you know, might be holding on to some of those myths. And in other circumstances, they might take more education and time to really understand kind of what's required in order to make this transition and this shift work in a healthy way. Needs of that exiting or transitioning owner with their new workforce, right? Or their existing workforce. And, you know, the model isn't right for everyone. And I think that one of the, you know, most beautiful things about it is that membership is voluntary. It's not mandatory. It's not compulsory. It is really about seeing yourself as a part of a community that's built in that business. And some folks, you know, they prefer being a part of a business that has one owner. There's kind of one person that describes, you know, here's how you show up. Here's kind of what the scope of your job is. And like, that's great too. And one of the things that, you know, can be challenging, similar to what Susie named, is that there is a lot of like labor and emotional investment that goes into building this business and having to cope with the stress that comes with all the different choices that business owners need to make. But what I will say is that, there's an adage there that's like, many hands make for light work. So if you find the partners that believe in the things that you believe in, that want to prioritize the things that you believe in, that heavy work becomes more joyful. And the decisions that are made are stronger, they're more thoughtful, and they're more enduring. So the other thing that you may have seen on one of the slides is that cooperatives tend to be more resilient. And what does that really mean? It means that they can pivot as soon as that board decides that it's time to pivot. And I'll give you one example from the pandemic. So, just like every other business, they were, facing some tough, circumstances. And especially with doing direct care work where you're in folks' homes, or you're in very, very close proximity with them when you're doing, maybe home and community-based services. Well, the nature of that work needed to shift a bit for some folks. And then for other folks, they had to go into environments and, serve in those essential worker functions, and maybe didn't always have the protection, the support, or the consideration that they needed to feel safe and supported doing that work. There were other circumstances where maybe people paused their care, and then all of a sudden that business went from serving 50 people to serving 14. And then what does that do for those workers' ability to make their financial obligations and to earn a living? Well, what we saw is that during the COVID period, that while, it was a tough time for all businesses, cooperatives in the field were able to make different choices. Where some of those full-time workers, instead of watching or being a part of a decision-making conversation where somebody had to be laid off, or there was, kind of dramatic decisions where somebody was going to find themselves in a different circumstance with that business, they made choices like, pooling their time off to wrap their arms around somebody who needed extended time off to take care of a loved one, or to make the decision as a group that we were all going to reduce our hours by 10 hours a week so that we don't have to lose Jennifer or Angel or, Marguerite. So they're able to really look at both the circumstances the business is facing, but the people that will be impacted. So again, it's right for some, and I would argue that it's right for a lot of people. But I do think that there are some important things that people need to think about when they're looking at whether or not this is the right model for them.
Were there others in the chat that we didn't get to yet?
That's all we have for right now.
Okay. There was one last thought that when we did our last panel together, the three of us, I recall somebody in the audience talking about how burnout is very common in caregiving roles, obviously. And we did touch on this, but I'm just wondering if there's more to expand and kind of get that emphasis out. And she asked, how do you address burnout in a cooperative? And it might be a short and sweet answer, but kind of the point behind it, if either of you want to respond in the collaborativeness of that, I think it's a good thing to hear for folks.
Well, I can speak to that because we have had an individual that has been in a tough spot. And what's beautiful about this model is the schedules are flexible. It's the people first, like Electra said, and we were able to accommodate that person for several months and have them re-enter at a pace that was right for them. And not all companies are going to do that. Not all companies are going to understand what it is to be a caregiver, right? So we've been able to do that at least in one instance, and I can see a couple more, but yeah, I mean, that's what it's all about. If we can't do that, that's we're not in the right business, So, and another thing I'd like to bring up too is there is some accountability to each other in a cooperative. So even for myself, if people see I've been working 12-hour days for, like a week or 2 weeks straight, they'll say, hey, you know what, Susie, take a break. It's okay. You need to go and do this, or, have some time with the family. And, so there is some accountability from other people that will help too. And sometimes they catch it before you can catch it yourself. And that's the beauty of it. That's the care.
Yeah, one of the other things I will add is that because the work to accelerate the adoption of the worker-owned model in the home care field has been underway for more than a decade, what's also happening is the tools to support these businesses are getting ever stronger year by year. So in a lot of fields, it is typical to have what are called industry benchmarks, or what are the trends that are happening in the field? What do we know about the sector or the industry? Well, a wonderful organization has been doing benchmarking with these specific businesses for several years now, and we are getting good data that we can use to kind of inform what caregivers need, what tools are needed, what experiences are happening in the businesses that are affecting them, and what's happening in the kind of market environment that these businesses are operating in. And one of the things that, has been a kind of a common story, whether it is a, cooperatively owned business or a private owned business, is that administrative work is very challenging, right? There's a lot that goes into it. It takes a lot of time. It takes meticulousness and rigor to really make sure that you're hitting all the compliance marks, and that you're holding people that are new to this through the process of getting everything started and situated. So again, cooperatives build their own tools, and they build the tools that are responsive to their needs. So now, launching later this year or even next year is a secondary cooperative for this industry. And what does a secondary cooperative mean? It means it is a cooperative whose members are other cooperatives in the business. And what that means is that they're bringing people together under an umbrella to help get their needs met and to answer questions, and to really rely on that strength in numbers and that peer-to-peer learning and expertise. And they're building out new tools so that, some of the tough things about Susie's job become a little less tough. When there are questions that she has, she can turn to other caregivers that are in other states and other communities, and that the trainings and education that she and her team are building out for their colleagues can be shared with other folks that are meeting similar circumstances. So, burnout is much easier to handle and recover from when you're really, really wrapped around in support, and that that you don't have to solve every problem on your own, or you don't have to show up as your very best self day in and day out when there are other folks who can step in and say, what do you need? How can I help?
You're muted, Kimberly.
There we go. Thank you both for that answer. I'm going to ask Ashley annoyingly one more time if there's anything else in the chat before I advance.
You are good to go. There's nothing left.
Okay, and then Electra, is there anything else you want me to backtrack for?
Yeah, if you go back a couple slides, there'll be one that looks kind of like a process. There we go. So when we're thinking about an opportunity to transition an existing business that maybe isn't coming to this choice by way of, a grant opportunity, but is really thinking about it for a business succession planning and exit strategy perspective, what are the stages that are, part of what a business owner and their team can expect? Well, the first stage is really around exploration, where we partner with small business owners to really understand what their needs are, what their goals are. and, how quickly they want a transition to occur, or what are some of their concerns about, thinking that maybe it won't work. And to really kind of set the stage for, going deeper in and probing whether or not the context and the climate is right. Businesses that tend to have a really active, engaged workforce, which is another reason why the home care field is a really great industry for cooperative transitions, is because those caregivers are showing up invested in their jobs. Otherwise, they wouldn't be doing the work. And then the next stage is around feasibility studies. So what does that mean? How are that existing businesses finances? How much of a buy-in would make that transition feasible for those workers and for those owners? Are there loans or other grants or other supports that will be needed in order to make the transition? Could the business be made stronger by bringing in other lines of business or services, right? If you were only exclusively doing home care before, what would happen if you started doing transportation or meal delivery service or any other supportive program that our community needs? Then, in order, to kind of make everything work and happen, some initial co-op education will happen, so that business owner is learning, based on the role that they want to have, what that new role would look like. And so that those potential employees would learn a little bit more about what would be their new role and what would be different in that situation. And some of that early co-op education helps people decide, from both the existing owner perspective and the, worker cooperative side, the worker owner side, to really say, like, oh my gosh, we can really do this. Like, I'm excited. I'm up for this. Like, let's go forward. And then additional education happens. Then the deal gets structured based around, when I was talking about the kind of flexibility elements of this, it gets structured around what those people want together. So if that means that they want a different kind of decision-making process, okay, which one? Let's spell it out. If they want to set their membership share price a little higher because they want folks to have more commitment, so spend more time working for the business, okay, let's talk about the pros and cons in doing that. Say they want to set it super low so that it's super accessible to caregivers. Let's talk about the pros and cons of doing that. We can talk about, maybe here's your kind of early stage strategy. Here's where we want to go in the future. How do we write a business plan that reflects that, and who our relationships are with? So some of that structuring happens on both the business development side and the financing side. And then completion and thrive. The transaction might take a couple months. This whole business transition continuum can take anywhere from about, 6 to 8 months if you're like super invested and your people are ready to go. But typically it probably takes about 12 to 18 to 24 months because you really want to make sure that people are sure and comfortable. And I will also say that so much of this kind of design it's not that much more different for startup businesses. So it is a business model that, to adopt it, requires a number of people coming together at each stage of development to make choices together. And that's really appealing to some folks and less appealing to others, but wanted to make sure that you had kind of a snapshot of what that kind of work involved. And again, you might be thinking, I wouldn't know where to begin. Where would I begin? Well, you begin with a partner like MCCD or some of the other wonderful support organizations that are in Minnesota. And if you go to the next slide, you'll see that MCCD worked to make sure that we had a financial product to help support people's conversions, startups, or growth financing. So we worked with legislators and the Minnesota Department of Employment and Economic Development to create a shared ownership loan fund. And essentially what it is it offers flexible, low interest loans for a variety of purposes for cooperatively owned businesses or community owned businesses that are owned by folks that are at least 51% of that group are people that are Black, Indigenous, from other communities of color, immigrants, low income, majority women-owned enterprises, veterans, are people with disabilities that are involved in starting a business or converting a business. And why is this important? It's because for cooperatives, you don't have one owner, right? So when you need a loan or you need credit, a line of credit, and you go to a bank, what will often happen is that that bank does not understand the model, and that they will require a credit check, or they might say, like, how do we do credit checks on everybody? Do we require personal guarantees of everyone? That way, if they default on their loan, we can, go after the assets of every person involved. It's important to work with a lender who understands the nature of cooperative businesses and really what is different about them and needs to show up differently in the way that their loan products are set up. So here you'll see that MCCD and other cooperative lenders that specialize in this, we don't require personal guarantees, meaning that we're not going to ask everybody to go through a credit check. We're not going to ask everybody to personally guarantee it. So if the business, whether it's due to economic hardship or some other reason, if that business defaults on their loan, we're not going to go after every single person for 100% of what that default is all about. And one of the reasons why that's really important is because if you're one vote in a body of many and you're just one part of the conversation, oftentimes a lender will want you to guarantee the entire portion, the entire loan. Or they may say, go ahead and submit your application with the 3 highest earners who have the best credit. And then what that does in the environment is that it means that somebody, a few somebodies maybe, have a little bit more at risk, have a little bit more to potentially lose than other folks. And that kind of undermines the spirit of doing things together. So it's important to work with people that can finance deals that honor and appreciate the way that the cooperative model is different. So our loans can range from anywhere from about $50,000 to $300,000, where folks might need, to do construction, to do leasehold improvements, to might purchase equipment, to grow and to have working capital to hire folks. And then larger loans can be considered on a case-by-case basis, but wanted to share that with you because, again, this is a product that was specifically designed to help these types of businesses, and it is available to businesses across the state. So it's not just a metro-based product. It is a way in which we can support the growth of cooperatives all across Minnesota. And even in communities like yours.
Thank you all again so much. I would like to check and see if there is anything in the chat as I advance here.
There is nothing.
Can anyone hear the sound on it this time?
I can't yet.
Oh no. Well,
maybe we can send it out in an email after we complete the webinar.
That would be nice. I think it's feel-good music, so it just started playing when I advanced, so I wanted to see if anyone could hear it. But I do want to thank everyone a lot for taking time to come today. Thank our speakers, our interpreters. If there are questions, we welcome them. I do want to let you know about upcoming webinars as well. We have Fostering a Caregiver Supportive Workplace, and then also coming soon, Lifelong Learning, the date to be announced. And please connect with us anytime. Here are some ways in which you can do so. And that was the last one. So I appreciate everybody's time today, and we'll stick on for a few minutes in case there are additional questions or comments. Thank you so much.